Hello. Hi there. We're live. I'm a couple minutes early. Um, why am I early? Better than last week when we had the complete, utter disaster of the system just not wanting to work at all. And I got back, I did a makeup live stream on Saturday to make up for this. I apologize about that again. Um, So I'm here today. We're doing this. We'll probably get one or two people like we always do. Um, I get more people watching it after the fact than on the fact. I would like to get more people and do something. Just make sure this going out. I'm having a hard week this week. This is the first week we're back. In a sense, I came back from my trip, after the elections. I kind of talked about that in the last stream about what happened in Poland about elections and the change. I mean, for the next 30 days, there's not a new government. There's going to be a delay before the winning party, the party with the most votes, Law and Justice, will probably have 30 days to form a government. They're not going to be able to form a government. When those 30 days are up, then they'll offer the coalition, the Citizen Coalition, which is a broad brand of including with a civic platform with a bunch of groups tied with them to be a broad background, anti-PIS, along with the what do you call Third Way Party, which is PSL and those guys. Will probably be a coalition. They don't necessarily have to bring the left in, but they would be. I'm not sure if they would bring the left in, but I don't think there needs to be a full left. Center right. It's in fact the coalition is basically a broadband coalition from center. Anti-PIS right, anti-PIS center right, center, and progressive leftists. Because some elements of the party went with the coalition, right? Then with the Third Way, or the left. So therefore, therefore there is a divide here. That's going to be very difficult to have a kind of a normal coalition. We'll see what happens. They're already spreading their rhetoric, so it's been kind of weird. Like all the incoming new party saying, "Oh, there's no money," and the outgoing party, "Oh, the money's pretty good." Outgoing government showing that the revenues are fine, and there's or the new government saying, "Oh no, crisis, no money, there's no money," and I think they're gonna argue to cut the budget on spending, which might ultimately undermine their own majority in that sense. So it's a weird thing, Polish politics. I had my classes this week. Students were fine. The students were all my second class, one of my classes, I got derailed for 10 minutes by a student when they talked about the Palestinian and Hamas less Palestinian and Israeli war that I kind of really didn't want to talk about because it doesn't really relevant to the class. But the students talk about something about trying to and I said, I kind of pointed out that how can you do that? You can't expect people. I mean, if someone's basic position is justice, peace will only be when you cease to be. Well, that's the existential either or, to be or not to be question that, and therefore, sorry, people in that situation, there's no room for compromise in that situation. They can only be compromised when both parties acknowledges the other side has some right to exist. As long as one party says the other side has no right to exist, then there's no compromise with that. You can only have total war. And the idea you can wage war peacefully or nicely is a silly thing in that sense. That's why I think in many ways a lot of the conflicts we've made war too nice. We've limited conflict. We have made war more humane in that sense, and by doing that, we have led to it occurring more. Uh, in other words, we've lowered the we you say our precision weapons and things like this. Wow, but then the enemy doesn't. I mean, this is something. Oh, one of my teacher. I mean, it wasn't my direct teacher, but it was a teacher of mine, Angelo Codevilla, argues that only when the enemy thinks he's defeated can there be peace, and he must think he is defeated. And the problem was, and the way we fought Americans and the Western powers have fought wars of late, we kind of are too gentle. Yet most of the society in question doesn't feel defeated. Their leadership has been removed, but in many ways it feels like what happened to the Germans in 1917, 1918 in that sense. It doesn't feel like they lost. In 1945, the Germans felt that they lost. They lost. It was evident. Their cities were crumbled, destroyed, eviscerated. They lost. There was no question that they lost. Okay, and I think this is the point that someone like Angelo Codevilla rightfully addresses in his work. And this was something he wrote like in the early 2000s, criticizing the way the Bush administration practiced both its operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. It went to nation building rather than war waging. And war waging is, and to be honest, this idea America, the idea that because America did all right in post 1945. The idea that America is good at nation building, that's not true. America is not good at nation building. I mean, we could argue that this idea that we made Germany, at least West Germany, and we made Japan a modern day is a bullshit. It's bullshit. Yes, we helped them transition to more stable liberal governments, but they already had a relative system of state and a civil society and a social structure and a state identity. We didn't take someone from nothing to that. And if we look at even how Vietnam, what happened in Vietnam, what we did was Vietnam was a perfect example of fucking it up. By what? Kennedy, you had in Diem's government, you had a stable regime that was there, powerful. He was trying to reform the situation. Yes, he was operating against a strong Buddhist rebellion. Buddhist interests were objecting to this, and that's why the emulation. The communists used that. The communists, the North Vietnamese used that as the division to kind of divide the situation. And instead of waging, we didn't invade. We didn't let the South Vietnamese invade North Vietnam. We should have let them invade North Vietnam. Oh, we couldn't because that'd be total war. Okay, yeah. If you weren't going to fight a war, you don't fight a war. You should have, same thing with North Korea. The problem with the Korean War, we wouldn't attack China. Oh, if attack China, we would go to. We can bomb the bridges on the Korean side, but we couldn't bomb the Korean side because the Chinese would go to war. But the Chinese do go to war. Oh, but we can't attack China because if we attack China, this is in many ways, this has been the thinking of the past since 1945, post 1945 world is, because of atomic weapons, we can't, we're not going to fight that way. We're going to fight this way with tying our hands behind our backs and playing by rules that the other side ain't going to play by. And so therefore it's very difficult to talk to people about this is that, they hate to say it, war is killing. War is killing. And it's one of those horrible, dark things that one needs to address. And war is brutal. Yes, it's not a good thing. You don't want war. You don't encourage war. This is why Hegel is kind of strange. Hegel kind of says that, that famous line about war and Hegel, that war seems to be the ultimate revealing of the human spirit in that sense. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe I'm misreading that. I remember that was being in the philosophy of history, someplace in the history of philosophy. Remember it correctly. I read the text a long time ago. I haven't read a history of philosophy in about 20 years. Really, no, that's not true. I think I read 20 years. 20 years. I got the new translation in the 1990s. There were very good translations out there of that philosophy of history. Most of the translations were from the 1970s onwards, early 60s, 50s. Knox translations, Fair translation. So that was that. The Constitution course, we finally finished Article 1. And next week, we kind of transitioned a little bit to Article 2, but not completely. Next week, this coming week, we'll do Article 2. We finished in my Tocqueville class, we finished the book 1. Yes, Napoleon on horseback on Jena. I remember that image. Yeah, it's true, because this is the ultimate. Jena is that great battle, which Napoleon is that moment where history is, the Germanic culture has achieved its height in that sense, its peak. And that's kind of an aspect of it. So yes, thank you. But back to my Tocqueville class, we finished book volume 1, part 1. And then we're going to be turning next week, starting the first. It's going to be dividing up, and I think 3-part. I mean, there's book 2 of part 2 of book volume 1 now deals with the kind of relational relations of volume 1. Volume 1 is that democracy in America is kind of like the first book, 1835, was the first book, where the first half of the book looked at it from the governmental thing, the kind of matter, looking at the matter. And then the second volume, part 2, was looking at the social, the kind of relational and dynamic aspect of the book. How the processes and structures. So that's going to be interesting in that regard. And the other course, my Monday courses are mostly methodological. I have the Political Thought Pro Seminar, which is a master's level pro seminar. We're starting Hobbes. We're doing Rousseau. Not Rousseau. Sorry, we're doing Locke, second treatise. We should have started a little bit. We kind of, it's an MA pro seminar for students who are going to be doing work in American Studies. So my argument, the title of the course is liberty and consent, right? The two concepts in this. And we're looking at it's basically how to do research in the history of ideas using the framework of, focusing on a little bit. We started with Paine, and then we did now do a lot for 3 weeks, and then kind of Tocqueville, Montesquieu and Tocqueville, just to kind of get some ideas about these things. So getting them to come up with a thematic, some kind of theme they want to do research on. I need to get that done, because the goal was to get a research paper out of them, do a major research work on them, not just a term paper, a research paper. That's why the class is different. So therefore, that is this week. Video recording, I'm a bad boy. As of today, I only did recorded one thing, and a Schmidt thing. I had a problem with recording this week. The weather is kind of fucky, yucky, wet. I did recorded yesterday. I got up rather late, and I went to record, and I got it, and then it was too late. I mean, it took forever. The real problem I'm having recording the Schmidt stuff, dictatorship is just the chapters, even when they logically divide the chapters, the chapters are so big. They're like, you can't, reading 30 pages is basically almost a 2-hour, particularly if you're interrupted and explain things with it. And Schmidt is one of these masters where the notes, I mean, you have to look at his notes when he has a note. I mean, doing this reading, I'm constantly realizing how brilliant Schmidt is in that sense as a scholar. He really knows the material he's doing. He's thorough, and I think this idea of Schmidt is kind of like this crank that a lot of people in history of political thought wants to do. And yes, I mean, his book that we have knows him for the concept of the political. It's a great book, and it seems a little thin. And people kind of want to dismiss it as kind of an idea. And I know the big idea of dismissing it in that sense, in history of among political thinkers. But when you look at his dictatorship, it's a massive work of not only jurisprudence but also jurisprudence of the jurisprudence of state theory. This is an understanding of constitutional structures. Schmidt's Dictatorship is a fantastic book for this. He really explains the evolution of the concept of this idea of the emergence, the executive function dealing for the exclusion, right? The idea is that, okay, the question is the emergency. What is the crisis? What is the crisis? What you have the normal world, and then you have the crisis. What is the state of the exception? And how does the executive function in terms of the state of the crisis? Okay, and he starts out the history of traditions. He starts out, looking at the way this operates out of the medieval state. But again, the European context in that sense, he gives us this. He doesn't go really back that. He goes a little bit. He does address the Roman things as tangentially. He shows the origins of it within Rome, but he really focuses on the manifest traditions that found in the experience of both German law and the European context, both in the terms of what happens out of the this commissarial tradition of then go to Baton. He goes that whole discussion part. Chapter 1 is a brilliant, divided into pieces. You have the pre-Baton kind of environment. Then you have the Baton Hobbes, the Baton in the monarchomarchs, which are these kind of famous Republican anti-monarchical writers are writing at the same time about it's responding to the Spanish and the rise of absolute monarchy and the Spanish rule. It's Dutch writers and people like that, like Janus Brutus, famous book, The Vindicated Conduct Tenaris, and other writers who are trying to attack them. The idea of absolute power, the right of this. And now in volume second chapter, which is so interesting, you have I need a little water. Hold on. A little nauseous for a second. I should have taken some anti-acid. Has been building up acid for some reason, a couple of days. So he spoke on the church history, but the church, and that's a very important thing. This is why someone like Harold Bremen's book. I mean, I remember back in the 80s when I studied, I was with Mel Bradford, and Mel Bradford pointed me to the Harold Bremen book, Law and Revolution, about the way, it's the idea that how this how the emergence of law changed at this time, and the rule from how canon law, this debate of canon law and state power, became a discussion. In other words, it's starting with the conciliarist debates about the power of the papacy, contrary to the feudal structures and feudal laws. And this is something that Schmidt himself starts addressing in chapter 2, the first part of chapter 2, at least the first. I mean, in the first part of chapter 2, and I only read to the first half. I had divided again by 50. It's a huge thing. It took an hour 46 minutes just to do the 15 pages. So it's Schmidt is a Dictatorship is one of these books, and it is a fantastic book, and I'm glad I'm doing the recording of it. I know that there's an audio book out there. There's an audio book, and I read it, and it was a computerized voice doing like this. Okay, my voice is horrible. Like squeaking, getting older. I'm probably got throat cancer right now. I don't got throat cancer, but I'm squeaky and um, ah. So therefore, that's that. That was the kind of weird thing for that Schmidt thing. So I need to really. I hope you do it today, but I gotta go. I had to go to school today. Why? Fire safety. So we moved in a new building, and because we moved into the new building, we have to get our fire certificate approved. All the faculty have to get there. So we had small mission groups. Of course, it was done in Polish. I understood 2/3 of it. The problem with Polish is someone asked me why did you ever speak Polish. I said, well, because I studied Russian long as a child, and it's a false friend. I don't know, so Greek and Latin. That's my wife jokes about this. When I went back to America and Greek family wanted me to talk, asked me Greek words. I knew I was going to. I heard the Greek word and I responded in Polish. My wife looks at me. What is that about? I said, "Oh no," because I know that bad Polish, but still the Polish word came to my mind for some reason. It's like I can read the languages, I can go read the text and I can read it. I know what they're saying, but when I try to say it, it's like I can never do languages. And sometimes this is actually seen. This is very much seen in my videos when I have to deal with the foreign languages. Sometimes I can read the French and say, okay, this is that book. But when I want to say what the title is in French, it's like German or something. And sometimes even my German and my Latin is really bad because I don't get the sounds right. And honestly, my Latin is weak. It's getting old. I never really studied it. I mean, I studied it kind of a little bit, and I kind of forced myself to study it later when I was doing some stuff. You had to learn it to know certain things. I studied Greek. I was more interested in Greek, and I was more interested in Hebrew, and I was more interested, French. At grad school, I had to learn modern languages, so French and German. I knew a little bit of Russian before going to grad school, but and then when I came to Poland, it was like really bad because, it was bad in the sense that I always I started when I tried to speak Polish, I sounded too Russian, and that got you bad relationships. That kind of got you negative, and so I just kind of felt like I had to unlearn a little Russian because there's too many false. Polish and Russian are there's too many false friends there. Too many languages that have similar words and sounds but have different meanings, and even how the structures of the language totally differ in this sense. So it's been strange. So we had the fire lecture, and then we had to go walk. Okay, this old fat guy had to go up and down the stairs. We had to go to the whole check the building out. There's portions of this. So we did the discussion. That was bad enough. But walking around everywhere, and then seeing how he even showed how some of the buildings would have firewalls pop out like this, and how how it's constructed is really different. The two buildings. It was not one building. The newer building is actually less well designed. I mean, it has more kind of like less water, close water things. So the kind of sprinklers, no sprinklers, less sprinklers, and more heat, and then more kind of devices, the ventilation system, and these things are completely different. So I'm sitting here saying, okie dokie, but having to walk through that, go walk down the stairways, go to the fire to show how to emergency, if you want to get to the emergency room, you have to break the glass to get the key to open the thing. You want to get it was a kind of a long, it was an hour. I had to go to school a little early. The wife came with me. She to move the picture. I got pictures. Oh, my wife, hold on. Okay, I'll do this one. Hold on. Okay. Hold on. I'm editing it. I apologize. You got blank screen. I didn't think about this. My wife tied it up. Ah. No, 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 no. Hold on. No, 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 no. I don't smoke it no more. Ah, ah, aha. My my Nicolo M. We got this painting. I couldn't find a frame for it. It's not a good frame because you have this. You have the. I got a good picture. You get the good picture done. For the purposes of that, I got my. Gonna have my little. You gotta have your like your monster on the wall, right? So my wife dropped some. But I have my office. My office at the university. I have two paintings, large, broader paintings. Two paintings of Washington. First is the famous Washington across the Delaware. I call this the executive picture, the picture of Washington's executive, commander in chief. This is the executive. And the other one is I have the picture of him at the Philadelphia Constitution Convention. That is the legislature. The legislator. It's not a parliamentarian, but it is the legislature, lawgivers. So the legislator and the executive. I'm going to have them in my office like this, kind of like against, facing each other in that sense. It's my kind of, my kind of little joke there for my office. I don't know how the people will see that, but that's the thing I was doing. So I'm sorry I had to go pin. My wife tied it up in the safety things to make sure it didn't get broken because she moved it from the place to here. So that was the kind of like I have some other pictures. I have my Burke picture, Montesquieu, Tocqueville, no Locke, no Hobbes. I have the Vogelin picture and the Strauss picture. I have my favorite Strauss picture with the cigar, like the Strauss with the cigar. Vogelin with his hat in his hand is how I buy to the as he's leaving Munich. Uh, uh, so that was my kind of my some paintings I got. I got them last year. And took a hat. I got them like Christmas last Christmas. So it's been over a year before I got frames. We got some frames. My wife's. We went to visit my mother-in-law and do some other things, and that's last week. And that's when she went to a place and bought some frames. She says, "Oh, because it's cheaper than." She couldn't find frames. Oh, I went found this little store that had frames. We get there, the frames are kind of like honestly. That's why it's not perfect. I mean, I wish I want but I got it. So I'm happy. Frames are finally framed and things are ready to go up, so I can actually have my paintings up. Rah, right. Um. Okay, we're at the 20-minute mark. We're over. There. I can have my first drink. Hi there, everyone. This is for my this is the Sagamore Spirit. This is a rye, American rye. It was given to me about 4 years ago, maybe I forget when I was in America last. And after I got out of the hospital, he came to visit my old friend, who I first met in 1999 in Slovakia, James Cadwell. He died 2 years ago, two Christmas, not this Christmas, but the previous Christmas. After the previous Christmas, I was like, sure. Like in spring, someone told me, oh, he died in it right just around Christmas. And I go, oh, God. I talked to him before that. He was very sick. He went back from Slovakia to Baltimore. He's a good friend. He was a lawyer who quit, lost his law job. I used to have Napoleon. Corlitz says I have a Napoleon III picture, but they had that had fallen out of an old book. It was kind of lucky charm. Well, I got. I mean, I had a Machiavelli picture for a long time. It got stolen. It got stolen. It was stolen. I had a little picture of Machiavelli, a little tabletop. I prefer these level kind of painting. This is my Mel Bradford painting picture Mel. I prefer the stuff like this. I had one like that. And what happened was when at my office, somebody stole it at the office. Well, not my home office, but at the office at school I had. Um, I was surprised that it disappeared. Like, ooh, what's going on here? Someone took my Machiavelli. I don't know why. What happened? And they all said, oh, they'll show. I kind of thought, well, you know, but then someone said to me that sometimes the colleagues left the doors open and it didn't, weren't people, even I did. I used to leave the door open and go to the main office, do something, or go to the library for a couple minutes. And someone said that, oh, you can't leave the door open. That's the thing that was from Poland, the idea. You can't leave the door open because they'll steal everything. Well, I never saw that happen that much. I mean, but well, back to this. This is a good rye. This is something I've almost finished a bottle. It's like about after this bit, I have about that much left of a big bottle. Nice bottle. It's a nice bottle. And just saying hi to Jim. Mermaid's Jim. I thought today. I said I break with tradition and have some alcohol in front of the group. Doing my imitation of instead of cigar, I couldn't get away with a cigar stream. That is pretty unlikely mysterious. Well, yeah, sure. Uh, this is a nice whiskey, rye. Actually, it's from Baltimore. It's Baton, Baltimore, so it's like this. The Sagamore Spirit. It's one of the rye whiskeys that they sell. The Preakness. I think the Preakness is at. I forget the race that's in in Maryland. I think it is the Preakness. Not the Derby. Derby's in Kentucky. I think the Preakness is in Maryland, if I remember correctly. And this is the whiskey that is served at the Preakness. So here to there, and here's you guys. I'm not doing the cigar streams because I'm not allowed to smoke in here. My wife says every time I smoke, I had a cigar in here. She goes, my friends like it, but she cracks out. She freaks out. Oh no! And my air filter, she kidnapped my air filter in her office. So that's like that. Okay, we're at the half-hour mark, and I want to talk about. I'll be continuing dictatorship and Rousseau. Rousseau's almost done. I think I will turn to Rousseau. I'll do one more thing in Rousseau. I'll do the political economy manuscript from this. I think it's very interesting. It's a big manuscript. I have to break it up into 4 parts. I think I have my current list here. I think it's 6. I think 6 videos of it. We'll see what happens because it is a long essay. It's the entry. It's for the entry that he did for the encyclopedia. It is kind of he raises the questions that will be in social contract. And I think it'd be a good kind of doing. Now, I'm not going to do social second discourse. I know people wanted that. I would normally do that, but dividing it up would be a bitch again. And I really, really, really like to get to Aristotle again. I want to get the Prince. I'll do Prince one more time for people in that sense, but I really, really want to do Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics and see how that is to do kind of to go through the ethics. My reading group is taking a break, and Saturday reading groups are taking a break until like a week or so, 2 weeks break, and then we're going to be doing the Plato's Laws. So that's going to be the reading group I'm in is with other academics, old geezers like us. These guys all have they're a little older than me, and so they're retiring. It's like, oh my God, everyone's retiring. Everyone's emeritus. It's like, okay. So we just finished Thomas More's Utopia, and therefore people want to take a break for 2 or 3 weeks because everyone's kind of like frazzled out of things. I don't know why it's going on. One of the founders of our reading group died. They had ALS, and they had his memorial service like last week, I think. And I couldn't go because his time was a day. I was out trying to even though it was not I couldn't go to the actual service in Washington, but also to the Zoom or Google Meets memorial, virtual memorial, simply because of the time. The time was being held. I just couldn't get to it. Other things to do. So it's been really weird. I think everyone's kind of fragile in the group because of this. But that's that. Now for us in our last half hour of things here, I promised I really should deal with something I mentioned at the end last week. Last week, I ended my discussion with a discussion about what I call the alienization of capital. I think this is my kind of addition to, this. There is this whole, starting with Burnham's managerial revolution. You can start out with this. We can look at. I've been seeing connections of certain books. The managerial revolution, then the famous Italian author Mazzeri called the bureaucratization of the world, which is Rossi. I think it could be called Rossi also. The bureaucratization of the world, which is kind of a response to. I think there's in many ways it's echoes what Burnham was doing. I think it's a little prior to Burnham. It was the idea that oh my God, that the communist system is not going to be this classless system after all, and that we have the rise of the apparatchiks and the rise of the administration, and that. And this again echoing the theme that you get in people like Mosca and Pareto and Michaels, that any large-scale network, anytime you have a large-scale, large structure of organization, you cannot have mass participation. Okay, you will, by definition, have to create mechanisms or representations, and in doing so, you form those. In other words, a few. In other words, networks of few, basically representative agents or delegated agents, who then what? They share, as Michael says in Political Parties, ultimately says, these people all of a sudden have more in common with each other than with the people whom they are selected to represent. They often will, and this is the creation of what we call the elite, right? The elite, in that sense. The elite emerges out of the mass. This is the reason how this is I think a very important idea. Where does the elite come from? This is where, and this is where Machiavelli makes this wonderful line in The Prince, right? The great are made and unmade. In other words, that you can always make the great. The elites, the notables. Notables are made, unmade. The optimates are made and unmade. And this is where my kind of response against someone, this is where I kind of get into my I think Pardini relying too much on his, black pilling with Yavrin gets this wrong. And I think this is something, and I'm going to have I should do an engagement on this. I still, someone really made a response to my last response, one of my things. I basically doubled down. I wrote one of my response videos to him about civilization is incommunicable. This is something he's been kind of repeating. This is something that he says in the Prophets of Doom, and this is I disagree with him. Culture is a communicative construct. It's communicative. Now, it doesn't mean it's simply communicative. Yes, it requires habits. It requires but you can adapt habits. And if we look at every civilization, how they emerge, not every civilization is a product of a homogeneous construction. The great civilizations, Athens, Rome, were mongrels. They weren't made of homogeneous populations. They were made of people, very heterogeneous populations, who then, through the creation of a political rule and a political framework, made them a people. Okay, in other words, there is, this idea that we have the pure people from this idea that we already have a people already, and that we only give it a form. Okay, but there's also the political formation of a people too. That there was not one people, but many people, and that people is given a form, and that form gives them their identity, and then makes them. And what happens is that over time, this is what Bernard Yack in his book, book by Cambridge, I think it's Chicago University Press. I don't know where it's up here. Someplace Bernard Yack's book about how on nationalism. That civic nationalism, this idea that civic nationalism and ethnic nationalism are wholly different. He says, no, I'm sorry, civic nationalism becomes an ethnicity over time. A civic nationalist identity, intermarriage, a people is formed. The intermarriage happens. It's going to have culture. It's going to have language. And this is something I think this is where this is why I like. I'm a social biologist and by training, I understand this. I kind of disagree. This is where this is why I on the so-called group selection debate. Someone between Ed Dutton and versus like JF. JF, Jean-François Garipé. Garipé is this radical individualist in that sense. In other words, his idea is that it's all about baby making, okay? It's all about the individual actor of baby making in that sense. And this is replication in that fundamental sense. He's right. But also we have to remember that process of baby making occurs in a dynamic of peoples and families, which and then over time, that then they become, and then other environmental structures, which become in a sense a framework by which the selection mechanism operates. So you get group selection out of it. Now, Koretz has a good point about there seems to be a lot of resistance to the idea that political authority can shape people in the AI. Yes, because I think this is the problem. They're unpolitical. There is an unpolitical aspect. This is what social. I'm an ancient, and this way there's no distinction between the political and the social. In other words, the social and the political are kind of two sides of the same thing. We to understand, the Greeks didn't see government that it's state. This is why this. In fact, state and society are synonymous terms in the sense in the early moderns. They only become oppositional terms in later moderns, who wants to create a division. Later moderns following Rousseau, post-Rousseau, wants to use the social to constrain the political and the political to constrain the social, right? The division of these two spheres. I think it's more. I'm more influenced by the ancients in this regard, that these things are one, and that you cannot. Okay. You can limit it. You can functionalize it. You can determine by limits and scope. You don't have to doesn't mean a total integration of total control, and that there are spheres. Government is institutions and instruments, but they're within society in that sense, right? That's what the difference. And therefore, we have to understand that the body politic in this political realm is the cumulation of a people. And what is meant by this? What is their ideas, the education, and the habituations and habits, the formations of people? And I think this is, I think AA, although he's a literature guy, he is fundamentally trained in literature. Okay, so that's why he likes the spirit. I think his literature background opens him up to the idea of the spiritual. Okay, but he doesn't really have of this. But then his economic background gave him the concrete. In other words, it's the combination of literature and economics. He doesn't have a fair understanding of the political in this sense. For him, the political is an artificial constraint, particularly given his Austrian idea. And this is the problem with the Austrian schools. The Austrian school has almost an anarchistic assumption in it that is silly. It seems to believe that you don't, it's an anarchistic structure, individualism, an individualistic anarchistic structure. That then you can see that same anarchy. You can see that, not anarchism, but you can see that same kind of in the great man theories of a Carlyle. There is something great, the great man, this great thing that's above history, that shapes history, this things. And my argument always been, yes, that's true, but then he's a product of these forces. And Machiavelli's point is that, listen, you can be great, you can have great virtues, you can have all these wonderful characteristics, but if the situation is not right, you're fucked. You're not going to be able to do anything. You're not going to be able to do this. Yes, you can have all these wonderful virtues and all these wonderful characters, all this wonderful possibility. But if the occasion does not make itself met, and if you're not wise enough to know that, everything is in vain. So if you don't, in other words, if you have the occasion but you don't have the skills or the virtue, it's for nothing. And if you don't have, you can have all the virtues but not the occasion, and they'll be for nothing. You need the combination of occasion and virtue, excellence. And that the great men that we know are great because of that interconnection of the context and the moment, that their capacity. Now, sometimes you can say they can make it, okay, but like a Napoleon, this is a Napoleon. No, he didn't make the occasions. He got lucky. The revolution happened. He didn't create the revolution. He didn't create the chaos that was an revolution. He just made the maximum opportunities of what was possible. He did, his limit was that he didn't, he betrayed the revolution in that sense, right? All the hopes of the revolution in that sense was directed towards a certain thing, but his own ambition, in other words, this is the problem with great people, is sometimes their own ambition sometimes make them think that they're the most important thing. And that's that's a whole aspect of this. Great leaders are those who don't really make themselves great, but make the thing that they serve great. There is something sacrificial in greatness in that sense. The real great leaders are those who are able to sacrifice themselves or put their needs second to the thing that they serve, the republic or the state, the people that they serve. Yes, they have ambitions and ego, but they have to, they need to learn that this is the difference between a successful great leader versus a non-great, is that he has to sacrifice his ego to some degree. He has to sacrifice some aspect of his ego, his selfishness. And that maybe this is one of the problems of Trump in that sense, is that he's still a child in the sense of, the only thing that redeems him is that he actually really cares for the thing. He cares for it in his imperfect way. He cares for the country, he cares for the people. He actually does love and cherish the working guy, the working person. Now, of course, he thinks he's better than him, but he doesn't think that in other words, he thinks he knows he's better, richer, and smarter and brillianter. But he still thinks, okay, they're human and they're my fellow citizen, and I think there is something like that of this, that even imperfect leaders, even someone who is imperfect, as long as they know they are able to value the thing that they're serving, and it's not merely them. That in effect the idea that he's sacrificing something. He feels like he's sacrificing something. Now he might say he's sacrificing his first ego, but okay, but that's still kind of a sacrifice of the ego. So let's talk about this. This is the idea. Elites are made and unmade. Civilizations are made and unmade. They evolve. They're not constant. This is my pet peeve with someone like Dugan. Dugan and also Dugan, Dugan is basically taking Huntington's Clash of Civilization. You can see the genesis of Dugan's thinking directly from Huntington's article, Clash of Civilization. You have to remember that Dugan, as a thinker, only emerges in the 90s and later. Okay, and his earlier books in the mid 90s and early 90s are very much influenced by Clash of Civilizations, and that's an early book. Right? This is the essay is early. This whole Fukuyama essay, this whole debate that happened in light of Francis Fukuyama end of history argument, right? And that happened in 1989, the spring of 89. So, what am I thinking about? Well, in my last week's video, my belated video, I really talked about this idea of alienization of labor. And I thought about this. What is the alienization? Not alienization of labor. I know everyone knows what the alienization of labor is. But the real thing that I believe that is, and I've been saying this since the 90s on the Strauss, when I was on the Strauss list, when I got into fights with people. It's not, I've been thinking about this. After my short term of working in Wall Street, oh yeah, but that's a different thing. Again, Corliss has a very good point here. Russia seems to be attracted to this civilization idea. It's like it is taken like a given. Well, that's right, because they're it's a crisis for them. That's because they're in a divide. Russia has two things. They're divided. Are they European or are they Asiatic? Are they Oriental? Are they the horde? Or that, in other words, this duality of identity that drives the Russian soul in that sense. What does it mean to be the Russian? This is why some reading like Gogol's Dead Souls and the so-called Troika, discussion of the Troika, of the Troika is the horse, it's the horse carriage that the Russians use, a sled carriage, right? The image of the Troika and the people and that famous line from Dead Souls that he does it, the famous line about, and you, Rus, are you not also like the Basic, the unbearable Troika, racing on, this idea of Troika, right? The road smokes under you, bridges rumble, everything falling back and is left behind. I'm struck by the divine wonder. The contemplator stops. Was it a bolt of lightning thrown down from heaven? What is the meaning of this horrific movement? And what unknown forces is hidden in these steeds, unknown to the world? Ah, steeds, what steeds? Are the whirlwinds of your manes. This image of the troika, the horses, the forces of the horses. And the troika is I think it's the horses, the steeds, and the sled, right? And again, we get that image from Plato's Phaedrus, the soul, this image of the soul being like on two things of the eros and thumos, driving and reason is this part of the holding, mastering the thing. But it's the warring aspect of the two things, the two sides of the soul warring with each other, and that therefore these steeds are stupendous. So what was Gogol doing in that? Gogol is kind of, I think what Gogol's doing is saying that there's these two spirits in Russia. There is this Asian spirit, this Asian Oriental spirit from the Tartars who conquered them and ruled them, who mastered them and controlled them and dominated them for hundreds of years. And then there is the European spirit. The European's a newer spirit, younger spirit. It has and starting with Peter the Great, the idea of ambitioning. They want to be like French. They want to imitate the French. They don't want to. It's what Rousseau says about that. In the Social Contract is Peter was the great disaster because he tried to make the Russians French, not Russians. Okay, And I think this is why someone like Dugin is like interested in the culture, this idea of civilization as a constant. No, civilization and the Russian identity is torn in this sense, and this is something he wants to deny. He wants to make this division really just that's why he coins, he embraces Eurasia. But what is Eurasian but Rus? It's Pan-Slavism, Pan-Rush, read by the Rush. But it's not Pan-Slavism. It's not merely Slavic. It's also Eurasian is all these Turkmen populations and Asiatic populations in the East that have nothing to do with this. This is why it is empire. It is an empire of this. It is it's not a civilization. Well, but that's the point. Are not all empires the origins of civilizations? And that political nationalism is kind of a retaliation against this. And that Rome only became an empire because by accident. Okay, Rome is a civic empire in that sense, as almost what happened with Athens, right? And then, however, Athens and its naval power and collapsing after 60 years of fighting amongst themselves allows the Macedonians to conquer them and unify them. And then the next under Philip, and then his son gets power, then conquers Asia, not Asia, but really conquers Asia, gets into the heart of Asia, gets to India, gets to India, but then dies, right? The shocking thing of that. But what did he do? Did he bring this despotism? No, he died before he could do what his political system was, his conquest. His conquest was beginning. And then what happened was it reverted back to these kind of older rulings, this hegemonic ruling, hegemony, empire. Although he relied on throne, it's Rome who takes a political form of a city and then rules the cosmopolitan. Other empires are just simply, if you look at other empires, it's hegemonic in that sense. So civilization does arise out of hegemony. The Russian racial nationalists have their own strange, of Aryanism as well, one based on the steppe peoples and creators of civilization. Exactly, that is. This is the new Aryanism. This is, I absolutely right. Corlitz is right here. And this is what's so odd about this. There is a kind of Aryanism in it. There is kind of like they found a Bronze Age. This is, and I would even argue the Nazi. I think this idea predated the Nazis. I think it's that Himmler and Himmler's crowd gets this idea from the Russian idea. It's not this idea of a primitive Bronze Age people civilization. In fact, remember the Nazis thought that this Aryan population came from the steppes. Okay, came from the steppes. Okay, so Koretz, read Hitler's Science. There's a book about Hitler's. Hitler's, I think it's called. I forget the name of the book. A book about the scientists and their processes of their race science. And if you look at the Nazi race science about this idea, Hitler had a very simple understanding of what the Nazis, this idea that he was a kind of Greco-Romanist. It was Himmler who was this Bronze Age argument, the Bronze Age things. And I think he might have gotten his wife Himmler's wife was Himmler's family came from that part of Germany that had significant Slavic influence. His wife, but his own mother had Slavic roots in that sense. And therefore, I think that this is where he might have gotten these ideas from in that sense. There is something like that. There is this, so therefore this Russian racial nationalism is in that idea with shares with the Nazis in that sense. I don't know. That would require, I'm not really a student of arcane Nazi, origins of Nazi ideas and Pan-Slavism. This is not my little interest barrier, but it's there. I read about it. And, Hannah Arendt does a very good job in Origins of Totalitarianism, the Pan-Slavism. Yes, there's a good book on Russian influence on the Nazis. I forget. Okay. Okay, I mean, this is true. There was Russia, the White Russians. Also, we have to remember that even Danish authors, that famous Danish Peter Gynt, the play Peter Gynt by Isbin, really Hitler loved it. The Nazis really loved it. So there is this kind of, in that sense, in this um, is it there's almost this idea of a racial identity of this peopledom. Again, that's that whole idea of the racial nation. Um, it's there. It's always there. It's look at North American tribes, North American Indian tribes. They see themselves as each one thinks of themselves as the human race, and the other ones are not. Okay, this is really the kind of way tribes operate in that sense. Us, them, right? Um, but back to my idea about capital. I think what we look at here, and I think this is the point why I'm going to end on this today, on this weird idea of to understand what someone like, this managerial moment, a Burnham's idea, and why it's so important to understand it, is that it's tied with, yes, it's tied with the Pareto school argument of elites, but we have to understand the context of what it is. It's organizations of mass society. It's that once you have the mass society, but how can mass society be? What makes, and that's what I was reading Gustav Le Bon. Someone recommended the crowd. This is what makes the mass possible. What makes mass society possible? It's capitalism. It's the market. It's the nature of the market. In other words, and this is where I think someone like Durkheim is absolutely right. It is the idea of the division of, his book on division of labor in modern society. It is essential to understand that the modern large-scale society, which becomes the state, becomes the large-scale network, that makes possible the mass in that sense, mass movements, mass populations, large-scale structures of large nations, politically viable. Because the Greeks didn't think, if you look at the ancient Romans, you could rule an empire despotically. Empires were always run through coercion and force. They were not political, but they were always, the problem with empire was, okay, this is where maybe AA has this point. He's looking at the old empire and how empire emerged, this idea between tribes and empire. I mean, go check my video series on tribes and empire. I talk about this, and there is this problem in the early human anthropology, the tribe and the empire, where the tribe relies on consensual relationships based on kin-based small groups, homogeneous kin group-based structures of consent and similarity, whereas the empire is a heterogeneous structure of one either warrior group or tribe conquering other tribes and organizing it of the power of hegemonic control. It is culture and civilization happens because of empire. It is after but the problem with this is this cycle of once it gets too big, it's because it's held by force. Because it's held by force and only force, it eventually will collapse. It'll get too big. It'll get not able to maintain itself. And either some new force will come in there. In fact, that's the story of China, right? Is if you go look at China and the hegemony of China rule, of that there's always the new dynasty that comes in power. And that's why the Chinese empire, the Chinese empires, in other words, the structure of how China is arranged forces, a dynasty will last too long until then all of a sudden the dynastic order becomes too weak, and then this regional war, as he becomes weak, alternative powers contest for authorities, and one will win it over and then establish a new dynasty, right? This is how the structure of that, you can say how China operated that way. So there is the eternality of the structure of conflict, but then a dynasty which is temporary, it has a temporality, it has a birth, death, and life. And then therefore the Chinese empire is this weird situation where the dynasties are just versions. In other words, each dynasty brings a new dimension within the framework of the Chinese Empire until it finally collapsed because of the confrontation with the West, right? And the attempt by the communists to rebuild it, first under Marxist lines and then under the new lines. Civilizations will collapse if it's only on civilization, if it's based on force. What makes political systems are not eternal either, but they are competitors with a ethno-racial imperial civilization in that sense. Civilizations are all if you look at civilizations, they're not homogeneous. They become homogeneous only through the conquest and then through interbreeding. Okay, so civilization itself is a heterogeneous construction that emerges over time, that through intermarriage and interconnection creates a common thing. So this is where I would point to the lie of the argument that civilization is not communicable, because without its communicability, it would not be possible in the first place. Okay. In other words, how do you see what his point is? The real point about him, AA's criticism of civilization is not. It's about the fact that we're choosing not to make immigrants comply. I mean, I think his argument is, my God, look at all these immigrants who are not refusing. Because why? It's the problem of too many of them, and the fact that the Western countries are not willing to use coercion. First of all, say, hell no, go fuck off. And then if you're going to let you in, you have to be us. Okay. It is we can say that the culture becomes, and this is the Western culture, not no other culture. This is the Anglo-American, the European culture. This is something that Spengler even talks about, is that there is this, and something about European culture, there is this kind of self-critical, hypercritical thing that, and that it is this self-critical thing that distinguishes Western culture from the other cultures, civilizations. And this is the weakness. This is both its strength and its weakness. And what happened was, when it became the self-critical part overcame it became too destructive to it, and started to. This is how Western civilization collapsed in that sense. It's the self-critical part of this. It's not that civilization is incomputable. It's that we've opted not to communicate it. Because remember, we have to give habit structures. So and there's limits to how many people you can take in. I'm saying, when the German hordes hit Rome, what happened? Rome collapsed, but then what happened? The Germans expropriated the Roman things and then used them to build something new. The question is, will the barbarians who take us over, will they build something better or something worse? Okay, I think we have to understand that communication, that civilization is by its structure something that is communicable. And one form of communication is coercion. Yes, it's coercion. Coercion and force are the mechanisms by which people learn. You learn as much by coercion as you do by. You have to have your interest. You have curiosity and interest, but also because pressure is put on you to do something. And if you don't do what you're supposed to do, there's punishment. Okay, so therefore, this is what I would say, that in that sense, the idea why what we can argue is that civilization must be communicative in this way for it to survive. It revitalizes itself by questioning itself. When it is communicating itself and fully communicating itself and actively communicating itself and educating its members and its parts to survive and to grow and to continue, then a thing survives. But when it becomes so self-critical and self-denying, and to the point where it doesn't think it can or should do that, and is being then overwhelmed by people who only see the goodies, and they're not being, people see the goodies, they come, yes, they come there for utility in that sense. Well, the Portuguese did it kind of successfully, but not really. The Portuguese, what Brazil, come on, Brazil. The Portuguese are not, how, I don't know. I mean, Portugal survived only as part of the limitation of Spanish power from being able to absorb them, and their own separate economic interests, and the fact that the Isabella's family maintained. I know. Remember Isabella after Ferdinand and Isabella's only daughter, right? I forget her name. She marries into the German, that family, the Habsburg family. She, eventually dies, and his next wife, he keeps the title in that sense, and that therefore that's why the Spanish crown is on this way. And it's what happened was that with her death, the the Portuguese title reverted to her, Isabella's side, and that reasserted its authority in a sense. That Portuguese identity is tied to that aspect, and that's tied to a royal family. It's tied to a political thing. In other words, this is the funny part: a monarch. It's a political identity. The original nations are always shaped by a political identity, a kingdom or a thing like this. And this is a political choice. This is a ruler who's saying, this is my territory and my people, right? It is this this is the earliest medieval concept of the patrimony in that sense. So that we can, see European identity shaping itself from these patrimonial rulers and their claims to their people that they have made and given shape to that people in that sense. But I'm off topic. I mean, I thank you. I mean, I saw that you're thinking about that, and I wanted to get this. I mean, why am I thinking this is important? I think this is this idea that communication, civilization is something fundamentally necessitates communicative aspects. Then the political aspect of it is important. Politics is about re-educating and building citizens, building subjects, educating, civic education, identity, our stories, our myth. And this is, as a literature person, you should understand the myths we make. I mean, my God, Shakespeare's history plays. Yes, exactly. You're saying Portuguese nationalists used to say that it was shaped by the authority of their kings. Exactly. Okay, but I want to go about this idea that, remember, that the political men make the political body, but then what? You need to get the propaganda to the people to believe it, and these are the myth makers, the storytellers, the great stories that then therefore define our identity, define our religion. This is the idea of the religion of the people. This our national identity, this belief of who they are as what they are. This is and my fucking God, AA is a literature person. He's a Shakespeare. He's doing what I'm saying. He's written 3 books on Shakespeare. He should look at what Shakespeare does with the English experience to see how Shakespeare, what is it doing? Shakespeare is taking the Tudor Elizabeth, is basically taking the Elizabethan, Tudor Elizabethan compromise and giving us the English narrative in light of it and the identity of this in light of it. The history plays, from John II, from King John to Henry VIII, give us a narrative story about the English nation, and that shaped the idea of the people, the poems, the stories, the poetry, the myth making. The myths, this is where, as the English scholar in him should look at this to say, my God, civilization is communicable. It is necessary communicable. It is learning of the myths. It's the retelling of the myths. It's the restatement of the myths and the stories that define us as a people. This is our stories. And if the people coming in adopt and accept your stories, and yes, and become part of the story by them believing them and asserting them, and then taking them as their story, not rewriting it, but taking the story as their story as well. And their children are brought up in that story, then it's communicative. That is, what do you think this is? This is a civilization is fundamentally communicative. I can understand this point, saying all these Muslims come in here and don't identify with us, but they bring their own culture and everything. No, that's not. It's because the English and the Western elites have gotten so degenerate and not willing and so morally corrupt that they don't believe their myth or their stories and their people are worth saving. They hate them. They're self-hating. They want to deconstruct the story. They want to show that they're oppressors and that, oh my God, the oppressed must liberate itself. Now, this is horseradish, oh shit. This is suicidal. This is the suicidal dimension of this. This is the will to death. This is the will to death in that sense. This self-hatred, this self-morbid, this self-destructive idea. And once the elites get this idea, that they have been, how they get this idea, they've been inculcated in that idea in their education. It's the elites who then spread this, who then, after the elites have the idea and they believe it hardly, then the elites then spread it all through the masses. And then when the masses get it, then everything's, chaos, right? Until someone, this is like what we call the moment of revolution in that sense, that in Kuhnian language, Thomas Kuhn's language, that you have the new paradigm to be created. The old paradigm is collapsing. What's going to happen is, right, we're in a chaos where there's no alternative paradigm. It's when the new paradigm is a thing that helps us explain the world. Now, is it going to be African, third worldism? And I don't think so, because they eat each other. They eat each other more than anything else. Go look at them. Look at the third world and see, is this an alternative? China? The Chinese are about to collapse. Eurasia? They're about to collapse. Okay, we're all about to collapse. And then who's going to be the next wave? Well, maybe that is only in the collapse something. This is the Phoenix myth, right? The idea that from the collapse, then what happens is something else will emerge. What will emerge? Will it be somebody? The remainders will take our old myths and expropriate them for their ends. Just exactly the way the Germans did with the Romans. That's what it is. And then we built it built multiple civilizations in that sense, right? Well, we're at 1:15. I'm way past my time. It's like we've had 3 people stay on for a long time, so maybe I hope they like it now. If you have any questions or comments, please, those of you who have not watched it, I'm going to say, wait a minute, you didn't finish what you meant by alienization of capital. Well, go watch my last video, and maybe next Friday, I may talk about alienization of capital more directly. I think it's to understand, you should look at the idea that today's markets don't really understand capital in the same way. We don't have, like I said in the last week's video when I raised this, look at the managerial revolution not only hit in terms of bureaucracy, it also hit in terms of the capitalist corporate system. Instead of shareholders, you have mutual funds, and these things who are managed, controlling significant portions of corporations. So you have managers who are appointed to be managers who appoint other managers, who appoint other managers, who put boards of directors, who appoints. In other words, you have a interconnecting. In other words, no longer people. It's like in the capitalist market, you had the citizens and the people, right? Representation of them. In the corporatist model, in the corporation, you had the individual stockholders, not having equal vote, but the owners of the stock are people who then do what? That they have possession and ownership of capital. What's happening in the new system is that people are no longer there. They own these intermediate. In other words, there's an intermediate entity, the fund, and the people are now not owners of the capital. They're owners of the funds, who then own the capital. So therefore, and therefore, the individual is no longer an agent representing the agent himself. In other words, the old market is the shareholder makes the vote. The new market, these funds make all the decisions. That is the alienization of capital. That capital is no longer possessed by people, but by these entities, these funds, these managerial structures. And if you understand that, then you understand the managerial and the system of this combined. This is the nature of the new capitalist system. It's no longer capitalism. It's no longer the ownership of private individuals. This is why I think in many ways someone like Andrei Kojev would argue that that Marx was wrong. Marx was right that communism was going to happen, but it was going to happen through capitalist means. It was not going to happen by revolution. It's going to happen simply by the nature of capitalism. The nature of capitalism is about, in fact, I'll end today's point on, isn't Marx right? I mean, look at who owns most of the funds? Pension plans, mutual funds, insurance schemes. Who are they? The workers, the people, the masses. They small this, small that, small that, small that. Big owners may own 20%, only 20% of the so-called 1%. Careful, so-called 1%. They might have wealth. They might control their wealth, but their actual percentage of the ownership of things is weak. And in fact, they're mostly controlled by funds and managers. And that, in fact, usually the big wealthy people have to be this negotiator through the managers, and who have the wealth and have the funds. Funds will get the wealth. And that the new capitalists are not really real owners of things. Rather, they're just they're people able to navigate the funds. And therefore, they're too much individuals. They have no real stake of something. When they do have a stake, the system can easily crush them by cutting off their access to the funds and future things, or marginalize them. So, and because the managers of one thing, the managers of the economic system and the managers of the administrative system are so interconnected, you have the structure of this. And this is what I want to talk about, I think, in my next Friday video, in that sense. This idea of the alienization of capital, in this sense, and why this is the danger. It's not the alienization of labor. Marx wrong. It's the decoupling of individual control, private people in their control over their own capital, of the forces that run this. It's that the argument was, well, rich people shouldn't control capital. It's better when actual people control capital than managers do. Isn't that the real the lesson we should learn, again, from Dickens' Christmas Carol? Because if Scrooge was a manager, he couldn't do what he did. He would be there'd be criminal charges against Scrooge. Remember, Scrooge can only do because he's the owner of the capital. He can by capital being owned by people, they can make moral choices. But when it's run by a fund and it's run for the good of everyone else, then there can't be moral choices. And I'll end there in that sense. Okay, if you liked it, like it, share it around, share it about. Hit the like button. Didn't like it, don't hit the like button. I didn't really like it that much. Say why in the comments, what I did wrong, what I could improve. Yes, we're all over the place. I'm sorry. Today, I had no plan to do anything, and I just wanted to keep my promise to people to do this and just talk about general things. Again, this is a messing around video in that sense. So if you have any ideas or comments you'd like me to address, please put them in the comments, questions, and I will do them. The other thing is, if not subscribe, encourage others to subscribe. Let's grow. We had some growth, and we also had the old timers who kind of left the video thing have died or moved on, quit YouTube, shrunk it a little bit. So we need to grow up some. I'd like to get to 400, sometime soon. Another way, you can follow me on social media, links below. You can follow my academic social media links there too if you want to do my research and things like this. I'm waiting for my article I submitted to get their comments. I'm crossing fingers and hoping they publish it because it'd be good and useful in another publication. Otherwise, I have to go to another post publication. I don't want to do that for this article. This article is a nice article. I think it should get attention. So you can follow my academic material through the academic social media. You can help me by becoming a member, subscribe to our Patreon, and you can contribute like your buck or some whatever they do that, so that it can help me do what I do. Or you can, if you want another way you can help me do it is buy one of the books that are listed below in this below underneath. The links are, I don't think there are links. It's the title of the book. You can buy it at Amazon or any of the social media. Or buy it by your local bookstore. That's it. Okay. Take care, and I'll see you next Friday. Take care. Have a good day. Bye bye. Have a good weekend. I mean, in that case too. Those of you having a good weekend. Take care, and ciao.